All right. So I think we're good to go. Excellent. All right. So what I wanted to start with is just in the beginning, go a little bit over your background, right? Just to give us context for your teaching and for the interview. And so I'll refer back a little bit to your survey as I go through the survey that you filled in. So I saw that you attended mostly research-intensive universities, but then also liberal arts college as a student. And so I'm wondering if you can just tell me a little bit more about the institutions that you've attended for your own education.
Okay. I mean, I've been very lucky because the small liberal arts college I attended, Wesleyan, is also research intensive for faculty. The faculty have a 2-2 load, and it's a publisher parish institution, and they don't really have graduate students. So we were able to do research. My senior thesis, which was in earth science, I did as part of a research group that was funded by the state.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I spent 2 summers in doing field work and then lots of lab work, and we went to a professional conference. So I've always had that research component there, as something that, they kind of portrayed it, that undergraduates could do real research, and that it was meaningful. So I've been very fortunate to be in a very intellectually exciting environment for all of my education.
And so this was, you mentioned that you did it in earth science, is that right? Can you tell me a little bit about the subjects that you did your degrees in, including undergrad, graduate?
So when I started my undergraduate degree, I wanted to be Jane Goodall. So I was double majoring in biology and earth science for as long as that was possible. And eventually the labs conflicted and I needed to sleep. So it became earth and environmental science. I was better at biology though, so that was a mistake. And then my junior year, I took a class in religious studies. I guess maybe it was my junior year. I took a class in religious studies because I was told I would not be allowed to graduate unless I had unless I had a humanities class.
Okay, yeah, makes sense for a liberal arts college, right?
And it was a feminist theology class, and it changed my life. And I could get A's in science. This is terrible. I rode crew in college. I could get A's by kind of slacking off on the midterm and then just studying all night for the final. I have a nearly photographic memory.
Wow.
But memorizing information never was meaningful to me. So I liked the field work. I liked lab, and then I'm taking this class and suddenly I'm not going out. I just want to read the books. I kind of fell in love with it. And also as a environmental scientist, we were mapping global warming and sea level rise in class. It was textbook. Our textbook had the Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. I graduated from college in 92. So well before that event, we mapped it and discussed it in class, hydrology class, as something that would definitely happen. And so I also became very interested in the fact that our planet was on fire and nobody cared. And very interested in the relationship between religion and science. And then that had kind of a feminist spin. I'm like, we totally can handle abortion scientifically, but that's a religious question. And we cannot handle our planet. And that is a economic, political question and not even a scientific question. The way that, so I got really interested in how societies decide things and really interested in the connection between religion and science, and in feminist theology. I also had grown up Catholic, and had quit that and was trying to find an understanding of my place in the world as a woman that did not make me less human or the sort of person. So, and the feminist theology class was taught by a graduate student at Harvard Divinity School. And it just opened up so many possibilities. And so, and I was like, I want to go to Harvard Divinity School. I want to change my major to religious studies. But I had accepted state funding for my thesis. So I was told in no uncertain terms would I be doing that I would be finishing my thesis. And, but I kept taking, or I guess, no. So I graduated Lost. I coached crew and they paid me in classes. So I was able to take enough humanities classes to apply to Harvard.
Okay.
I worked for a couple years because I was afraid that was a crazy idea. And then the 3 best years of my life, I think, were at Harvard Divinity School. It's such a fascinating place. I bounced back and forth between the history of science department and the divinity school, and the requirements were so light that we had to take half our courses in divinity school, and we could take any graduate course at Harvard that they would let us into. I mean, the way it works for graduate classes is you go and ask the professor if you can be in their class. So some people said no. And it was just amazing, worlds opening. Like I took a topics in environmental studies that was co-taught by someone from public health, the law school, and the divinity school.
Wow.
And it just, it just was fascinating. I never intended to become a medievalist.
Yeah, it sounds like such a unique path. And so you started taking classes in history, I presume, through this? Or?
So I was very interested in liberation theology, feminist theology, even though when I went to Harvard, I wasn't practicing anything. I was firmly a postmodern feminist, but I wanted to find out how this all worked and how science and religion fit together in the way people understood it. I didn't want Templeton money because there was too triumphant of a narrative. So that kind of pushed me away. And then I just had this class. I had a 9 o'clock class and an 11 o'clock class in the same room. One was Reformation theology, the other was liberation theology. And there was a medievalist teaching, the history of the church, 400 to 1600 in the middle of that. And so I just, they didn't police it. So I was like, I didn't want to give up my chair. So I just stayed there and I audited that class and I fell in love with the professor. And I thought, well, I'll just do a little bit of medieval stuff. And then the next term I was teaching a class on persecution. And then I thought, well, if I pay attention to the connection between religion and science in the medieval period, I'll better understand it in the modern period. I mean, these were all naive things that somebody who did no history as an undergraduate would only make that mistake. But that's what I thought. So I kept taking her classes and I kept turning myself into a historian, even though I had no intention of being one.
It's funny how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah. I even had an argument with her once because she was tearing apart a paper I wrote, and she's like, you can't write like this because you have the makings of a good historian. And I'm like, I'm not a historian. What are you talking about? So, so it's kind of an accident that I'm a medieval historian. Although now in the place I'm at as someone working on their second book with the third book in view, what I wanted to do was not that impractical. It just was a long journey to ask those questions. So I'm starting to write on, connections between religion and science, not in that kind of broad way, but I'm starting to poke at the questions that motivated me when I was younger. I just didn't know enough about how to go about it. And of course, the answers are way more complex and nuanced than I thought they were. So, yeah.
Yeah, and some journeys just take a long time, right?
Yeah.
So, And then you, for your PhD, you ended up going into a history program? Or can you tell me a little bit about that sort of like final education piece?
Yeah, so I got my PhD at UC Santa Barbara in history. I studied with somebody who had written on theology, feminist issues, and also institutional history, so I could still go there and do the kind of work I wanted to do. I became, when I was applying, I said that I wanted to work on this. There was a condemnation in 1277, came from the Bishop of Paris, and it outlawed anything having to do with Aristotle. So people couldn't talk about it. And it outlawed specific propositions, 219 propositions that you could not say. It had an amazing effect. Like, people started using the things they couldn't say as like proofs. Like, they'd state the opposite and then build an argument from that. And it had fascinating outcomes. So I thought this would be a great moment to look at for the relationship between religion and science. And I was very much interested in how the scholars understood their expertise and identity. But a book came out my first year in grad school that didn't really scoop my point, but I decided it had. And I did directions. But I picked my mentor because she, her first book was on the cult of Saint Martin of Tours, who's the most important French saint for the Middle Ages, and how that was navigated in the town where his cult was, how the townspeople tried to claim his legacy, how competing churches claimed his legacy, how they negotiated this through narrative and ritual and violence. You know, so it was kind of part of my interest in how do people define community and define their truth, and how does that all play out.
Certainly very relevant for the current moment too.
Right, exactly. I mean, I was getting very far from climate change, but, you know, still the driving question, like, why do people organize their societies in these crazy ways? So,
thank you so much for sharing. That's a very unique pathway. And, I see the connections to thinking about some of the virtues as well. And so just to, return a little to your onward path, if so to speak. And so I saw in your survey that you've taught at a number of different kinds of institutions, right? Research intensive, not research intensive, liberal arts. You've been teaching for more than 20 years. So it sounds like you've also been at places other than UCI. And can you tell me just a little bit about where you've taught?
Yeah, sure. So I TA'd at UC Santa Barbara, which is a lot like UCI structurally, although the students are very different. I then taught at DePaul University for a year, which is a Catholic school that has a very strong urban outreach commitment. They would take 50% of their students would be from very poor, disadvantaged students, and they would give them a chance, lots of financial aid and, you know, a chance, not necessarily always a supported chance, but as a chance to get ahead. And so it was a very interesting place to teach for a year. I was visiting there. So, you know, my first year teaching, I was on the market. It was very interesting. I don't think I slept that whole year. But it was good.
It's a rough time.
It was a rough time, but it was a very uplifting institution to be part of, because their mission was definitely interesting. They were very supportive of me as a visitor. And then I taught at a small liberal arts school, Willamette University. I was their professor of ancient, medieval, and Renaissance Reformation history. And so early Islam. You know, basically anything I had an exam field in or of expertise, I taught that. Which meant it was a lot of survey kind of stuff, except for the smaller classes. At Willamette, a small class is 8 students, you know, because they're paying for a very small teacher-student ratio. And then I taught at UNM, which is a research institution, but Slightly different.
Sorry, can you spell that?
Oh, New Mexico.
Okay, New Mexico, yeah.
Albuquerque.
I was like, Minnesota?
Sorry.
No, it's, New Mexico.
I think there's like probably a lot of, probably a lot of options for that.
Yeah.
Letters. And that was in New Mexico, the students have a lottery scholarship. So if they get better than a C in high school, then college is free as long as they maintain that C. Which means you get a very diverse student body because economics aren't in the way. And it was a fun place to teach. They're also woefully unprepared for college. So you can't go at full speed, although there are some students who are ready to go at full speed. And their understanding of medieval studies was, Western Civ was valued there. So I taught Western Civ 3 out of 4 semesters, which actually gave me a lot of time to write. By the third time, like, I don't even have to look at notes. I know this class by heart, even though I don't. What?
You're a bit on autopilot, right? Once you've taught
even though I don't believe in this class. So I was trying to teach it and undercut the narrative at the same time, which actually it worked okay. And then I came here.
Great.
And I've been here since 2008.
Okay. And you're currently an associate professor in the history department, is that right?
I'm currently associate, yeah.
Okay. And you've been in the history department this whole time?
I have, yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much sharing. I love hearing about people's, pathways, and it's helpful to have context. And so I wanted to chat just a little bit about the kinds of classes that you tend to teach at UCI. And so it seemed like you teach a full mix, right? So from undergrad all the way to PhD, sort of like a mix of smaller and medium-sized classes. Can you tell me just a little bit more about what sort of your standard offerings are in terms of classes?
So in my department, we have to do 1 service class a year, which would be a larger class that would hire a TA. I have avoided, we don't do Western Civ, which it's good. It's not really an ethical class to teach. So we do World instead. I have avoided World because it wasn't available when I came here, and I've already made up my classes. But so I teach a large class, somewhat large class, only 120 is my largest class right now.
Oh, it's not small, but yeah, it's not huge.
That's on the plague. And I teach another class that usually it can fill 120, but it's been at 60 most recently. And it was 120 last time I taught it. Oh, that's interesting. And that's on Queens. So the plague and the Queens are my lower division classes, and they generally fill. The plague is, genuinely interdisciplinary class. I get a lot of public health students that, and I also invite comparison. So their final project, they had to compare plague and COVID. And they had to pick, economics, social relations, medical approaches, political implications. Like they had to pick a theme. But
I love that.
Yeah, it's a depressing, gory class that is actually a lot of fun to teach.
Yeah.
And then the Queen's class, they're just there because people are interested in Queens. Queens are on TV. They're in, and it's not a Western Civ class, but it's a history of Europe class designed, disguised as a Queen's class, but also it's a feminist class. And when we talk about and problematize gender, I don't use the word feminism, but you can't talk about Queens without talking about changing attitudes toward gender and also people defying gender expectations. So because a queen is supposed to be this meek wife, but when her husband's away, she has to take over. So it's a very, we can talk about that, and students find that exciting, and I'm
sure they do. I want to take it.
It's a really fun class. I mean, some of the individuals we study are just extraordinary. so those are the lower division classes. And then I've been director of honors and on sabbatical, so I haven't taught my upper division classes in a really long time. I'm a little bit scared. But when I came here, there was an outgoing medievalist who wanted to just do the medieval surveys. And I had been doing them at UNM, and I didn't want to do them anymore. So I don't teach the medieval survey. I teach a class on the deadly sins, which I'm teaching this winter. Which is kind of an intellectual political history of like medieval survey, like from the perspective of the sins. And I teach a class on the on medieval towns, which is kind of an economic history. So the deadly sins does the whole medieval period. The towns is really from the commercial revolution to the end of the Middle Ages. And then I teach a class on the Crusades, although the last time it was full of, like, it was politically difficult to teach that class because there were some misguided students who were upset that I wasn't teaching both sides of the Crusades. Like, it's this is not a news program. There aren't both sides of the Crusades. And from a very misguided modern anachronistic point of view, and they just kept disrupting the class. So I'm worried about the Crusades, but I also feel like I need to do it again. I just have to toughen up. I also teach a lower division class on monsters and borders, which I haven't taught in a long time, but I think I'm going to get to teach next year, which kind of deals with proto-racist ideas, but also how ideas of otherness are developed along multiple axes. I'm now, I think I'm teaching, next year I'm teaching a class that'll be the first time on crusading Europe. It's our capstone class. So it will be seniors, and so it can be rigorous review of the literature. And because my current book project is on gender and crusade, but I'm very interested in how Europe keeps alive a crusading ideal long after the crusades are possible. There's not a successful crusade after the fall of Acre in 1291, but they keep trying to think about it and reorganize their whole society to have a successful crusade. So I'm interested in how that affects the way medieval Europeans understand gender.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
You're making me want to be a historian.
I am. I do get to have a bit of fun. And for graduate students, our program has shrunk. The humanities programs have shrunk considerably with funding, and now with the TA thing, who knows? So I don't take PhDs because I'm the only medievalist. There hasn't been a medieval PhD student for a while. Wow. And so I have taught a graduate reading class on visions and visions and gender and gender visions and power, or something like that looked at medieval visionaries. And then I've taught, our program has this first year and second year research seminar where all the students are together. And I've taught the second year research seminar twice, and I'm teaching the first year research seminar in the winter.
So
so that's about it. Like one more upper division writing class on saints, but
wow. So you have a real breadth, I think, in terms of the kind of classes that you teach.
I mean, it's fun. I mean, I don't do any of I don't do the survey, which for me would be boring. But I do have fun.
And do you remember a time when you've sort of changed your teaching in significant ways?
Mm-hmm. I have had to change my teaching significantly often while I've been here, which is interesting because that was not the case. Like what I did at DePaul worked at Willamette and at University of New Mexico. So it's really it's the generation of students. When I first came to UCI, what I was doing before worked. So the first time I had to change my teaching was after 2011. And I think it was partially caused by the tuition hikes. My classes used to be much more rigorous than they are. They were famously rigorous, but people took them for that reason. So for instance, every Friday, I would assign a scholarly article that we had, so not the undergraduates are not the audience. And I did this in all my classes, even the lower division. Every Friday I'd assign a scholarly article the students we had not discussed. And they would come in and we would have a 12-minute essay quiz.
Wow.
And they had to write 4 sentences, the thesis, 2 examples from the article supporting their thesis, and a conclusion saying why that was important. And then we would debate. Wow. And our Fridays were so much fun. And then it got to the students started buckling under that assignment. I even had a student say, he said, I had 2 classes with you and I had to move back home with my parents so I could pass them. I was just like, oh. And so it's their ability to read, but also to trust themselves and kind of, and I would tell them, I'm like, I'm going to tell you how to cheat, how to read this article. Go to the last paragraph, read the conclusion, and then go and look for examples that prove the conclusion, and you're done. You don't have to read the whole thing. And but this current generation of students is so afraid of being wrong that feels like cheating to them, and they can't do it. And then they'll say, you've assigned too much reading. I'll say, did you start at the end? No. Well,
Yeah.
So I've dropped that quiz assignment. So that was the first change, and that was drastic. And then I've been very involved in the faculty learning community, talking about first generation scholars. And I was I wasn't the first generation, but my extended family was. So I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for Wesleyan, that's for sure. And so I'm sympathetic to that. So I think I started to make my classes a little more easier and to scaffold the learning that the students had to do. Which really runs counter to my Wesleyan education. So until I made that change, I was doing everything I could at a research institution to give my students a Wesleyan education, which is all about excitement, skip the prerequisite, jump in. What do you think? Because their BA is not going to get them a job that requires such expertise. Excitement will get them everywhere, So I used to try to teach that. And then most recently, for the pandemic, I felt like I lost my vocation for a little bit.
You lost
I lost my teaching vocation for a little bit, and it was really hard. So that was another change. And then I kind of feel freed up by ChatGPT because I think it's going to let me, everything's in class, kind of drop all the scaffolding and everything, which I actually think students see as busy work and it doesn't help them, even though I guess it's the part I'm like, I'm running counter to DTEI, but I just think they need to jump in. We do need to practice skills, but if that practice is an assignment, it doesn't become a practice anymore. So those are some of the changes I've made. Other changes I've made are, I don't do a final during the final exam. I do group presentations because I'm trying to create community. And I don't think their last time together should be them quietly bent over a desk. So I do 2 midterms, one in week 4 and one in week 8. And then they prepare for their group projects and they present to each other. And that can be really wonderful. It depends. COVID kind of hurt that a little bit, but not entirely. I mean, we were doing presentations on Zoom. So, and now that the humanities are crashing, like we're just not going to have funding. My field is dead. I still think it's important, but other people don't. I'm also thinking, okay, what can I give these students for whatever's coming, which maybe will be nothing, but likely will be major social, political, and economic changes. Like, what can I give them they can take forward? And in that case, medieval Europe is a great test case because medieval Europeans built their society on rubble, left from, a colonizer that withdrew. So, and that's an oversimplification, but, it's the fact that medieval Europeans were always living, and there's tons of evidence that this affected their thoughts, especially, really throughout the whole Middle Ages. In the early Middle Ages, more, like we need to catch up. And in the later Middle Ages and Renaissance, we need to reconquer. So, I mean, the Roman legacy gets blended by Petrarch with the crusading ideal and ideas of colonization and conquest. But in the early Middle Ages, it's kind of like, we used to be part of something much bigger than ourselves. And here we are alone, and trade's at a trickle, and we're at a subsistence. And I mean, for the elites, a lot stayed the same, but so to think about that as a good place, ancient and medieval world are great places to get lessons for how to deal with catastrophic change. And I'm not like going to tell the students, you're facing catastrophic change, but I think about, how can us talking about this prepare them for whatever, at least to be flexible, that they're probably going to graduate. And if they've defined their career too narrowly, they're going to have to reinvent them, at least themselves. So I'm kind of, rethought that. And that's just been in the last couple of years, as, I don't know, in the social sciences and the sciences, people might feel insulated from it, but, there are universities that are closing, or universities that are just cutting all humanities, or cutting history, which, 20 years ago, that would be impossible to cut history. So, it just, it's just interesting. And,
I think there's generally a lot of disenchantment with higher education at the moment, not just in the US, but in some other places too. And I think it hits some fields harder than others.
Yes, right. Because we're understood to be fluff. And, it's just weird. Like when I go to my department meetings and I am in a department full of dedicated historians, and, there's a lot, I think, well, this is my home. These are people that are very interested in, why change happens the way that it does, and how individual people and institutions cope with it, which seems to me one of the more important things to understand in life. But I am a historian, so I'm biased that way. It's like everything else it might help you get ahead for 5 minutes, but it's not going to help you put it in a broader frame.
This is actually a great segue, I think, for shifting a little bit to talk about the intellectual virtues, right? And so I think this is a really wonderful transition. And, my first question is really quite simply, after sort of participating in the seminar, right, which now seems like longer ago, then, maybe. I don't know, can't believe it's already December. But how are you thinking about what the intellectual virtues are? How would you describe them?
So what I find exciting about the Intellectual Virtues Project is their potential to create common ground among the students.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another issue with teaching that I haven't addressed in this conversation. And also to put some responsibility on the students, which I think that they've lost their sense of responsibility because they feel trapped and hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And they've lost their sense of trust of the professor because there's no common ground. And so I am thinking of these intellectual virtues as a tool set that they can use to take control of their education and responsibility for it at the same time. And, I work on the 7 deadly sins. So I work on the virtues and I understand, I've read the Nicomachean Ethics and I've read scholarly articles about it. And so I know where Aristotle was coming from in that political context. I'm even more familiar with the way that virtues worked politically in Rome. So I know virtues can be used, or the performance of virtue can be used for terrible consequences. But, and then for the medieval stuff, it's very important. So it also coincides with the people. It's actually a perfect fit especially for this Deadly Sins class, which is kind of dealing with how ancient and medieval people tried to determine how to be a good person and for what reason. So I'm thinking of the intellectual virtues as a way to say, okay, you might not feel like you're in control of your education, and you might not feel like you can trust me, and you might not feel like you know who you can trust. I want to give you the tools so you can trust yourself. Here is, these are tools that you can pursue in your education so that you can trust yourself, but also know this is hard work. Like, they're virtues because they're not easy. And they will help you, stay true to yourself, even though sometimes that might be horribly inconvenient. I'm not telling you. So I'm excited about the ability for them to, trust themselves. My unit's on intellectual cowardice, and I talk about cheating in it, and it's just interesting, to think about, not to put too much pressure on them, but say this is yours. There's this beautiful medieval thinker, Hugh of St. Victor, who he's talking about reading, but he says you should think about each book that you read. And for medieval people, reading would be intensive, not extensive. So you'd memorize the book basically and contemplate it as a stone that you're using to build the castle of your soul. So there's this idea that your learning is turning you into something and you're active in the process. So you want to think about how you do that. It's both, it's a very individualized thing. And I also like the idea of emphasizing that we are in an intellectual community, which students are very resistant to. And you have a responsibility to that community, because if you tear down the community, you're tearing down yourself. The community helps you to learn. And that very much connects to Aristotelian ideas. If you undermine your city-state, you might end up enslaved by another, so I'm very excited about the project. I need to look at the modules. My only concern is, how much time commitment it's going to be for a student who's not caught up. But I'm excited about it, and I think the wisdom component will compare well to the Deadly Sins class and also help me be more global. As my Deadly Sins class is very much ancient Mediterranean, medieval Europe, and Western medieval Europe. So I'm excited about it, but I haven't looked at the modules yet.
Yeah, great. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that in depth. So it sounds like, as I hear you talking, I wanted to sort of like bring in something that you said in your survey, right? So if you might remember that we asked you, how would you think about the intellectual virtues, right? And so what you put is habits that promote authentic and community-centered learning and, as a result, personal growth and discovery. So do you feel like, thinking back to the seminar, do you feel, because obviously you filled in the survey beforehand, right? Do you feel like sitting in the seminar, did that change at all how you were thinking about the virtues?
Oh, that's interesting question. Not really. I mean, and maybe I came in with too fixed an idea. I mean, I know that Duncan portrays them as habits because he's coming from the Nicomachean ethics too. And so I can't think of portraying the virtues as anything other than a habit. The authenticity, that's probably my politics there. And also my field of study, right? There's not, as long as you're working from the evidence, you could have competing historical interpretations that were sound, especially for an undergraduate, right? Who doesn't know everything. So, and the community-centered, I think that's my emphasis and not the programs, but it's kind of a practical emphasis. But I included that in I included habits, authenticity, and community centeredness in my module, and they accepted it. So I don't feel like I was off in that way. And I would guess that if the presenter from Loyola and I sat and talked, that we would probably agree about those kind of things. So it's interesting to me that you asked this question because I didn't notice anything in the training that suggested that my definition was off.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong, right? I'm trying to think about how you make sense of it.
Yeah, but the training was very fast. And there was a lot of information given really quickly, and it was also really broad. Like, it wasn't a conversation about this. And I did go in, for a conversation on the virtues, I'm coming in with a lot of baggage, right? I've read a lot of stuff on it. So I could, if I haven't read the same stuff as the project organizers, my understanding could be different, and that would take a conversation to change it rather than just a presentation where my brain's probably filtering out everything that's different. I saw the training more as a practical thing. And I want the students, I guess I want to push authenticity. Because I think the biggest thing that's in their way right now is they're trying to find out who they're supposed to listen to. And in that discourse, whether they're on the right or the left, they're being told not to listen to their professors. But we're not opening their brains and shoving in information. We're just inviting them to test their skills, but they're afraid of that. And so I guess by authenticity, I want to give them the tools where they can check in with themselves and tell them this is the only way that you're not going to be taken in. You're afraid of being taken in by just listening to the right person, but what you really need to do is train yourself so that you can't be taken in. Which I might be naive. I still think you can do that.
really helpful and interesting. And so I remember on your survey, you've already started talking a little bit about how you might want to use the virtues in your teaching. And so it sounded like when you filled in the survey, you felt like you didn't yet incorporate teaching for the intellectual virtues in your classes. As you were sitting in the seminar, do you feel like that changed at all how you would think about incorporating the intellectual virtues, or whether you're doing that, what it means to teach the intellectual virtues?
Well, what I love, and this seems kind of radical, is that there's a very good chance the students will have already been exposed to the intellectual virtues prior to coming to my class, and also that there's this thing outside the class that I can direct them to, and that the institution is fostering it. And so that could make them not trust it, but I do think that I'm excited about that they can have the link. And again, this Deadly Sin class, which I haven't taught for a long time, provides the perfect opportunity to talk about the virtues in a very flexible way. Like my most recent publication is very critical of the pursuit of virtue and the byproducts of racism and misogyny that it produces in the medieval monastic context. So I'm not naive about the virtues. And I would bring that up with my students, but, as you shape yourself, you have to be very careful about what conversations you're closing down, what kind of interactions you're ignoring, and if you're exporting your own vices onto somebody else. So it's not a naive understanding of the virtues. And I did feel like the presentation was, presenting a more, this is all good kind of naive understanding. And I expect it to get backlash because people in power have always used their virtues to justify the oppression of others. Or, structures of oppression can make it impossible for somebody to show up in a virtuous way, right? So in Rome, you had to be calm all the time. You had to always present calm. You couldn't give way to anger or being upset in public, which is fine if you're an elite. It's read lots of philosophy. So, or, if you run from a police officer because your community's been terrorized, it's not a lack of virtue. It's a taught habit. And so I think that, I do think it's complicated, but I also think it's well worth talking about it. And I have this class where it's natural to talk about it because that's the topic of the class. But I would allow the wisdom. The way I'm thinking about it is to allow the wisdom unit be not necessarily extra credit, but a strand they could choose for their final project.
I see.
So, and I wouldn't force it just because to get to the wisdom, you have to watch, right? For them to get to the wisdom, they have to go through the whole program.
It's cumulative,
But for people that were interested, the final project could be dialoguing between the wisdom and the wisdom component and the medieval European component I'm teaching. And that would allow a global component. And so that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it. But I could have them just, not even get to the wisdom thing. I could have them, because of my topic, I could have them evaluate the Antidote to Virtues project in dialogue with what we're talking about with the sins. Because we are going to really historically ground the sins. Right?
So it sounds like this would be, you haven't used the modules before in your classes, right? This would be kind of like the first foray.
Right.
Is that right? Yeah. Are you, as you're thinking about doing that, are there aspects of it that you sort of think might be challenging as you're thinking about possibly doing this?
So I have to log in and watch the modules. This is my light quarter. I'm not teaching. it has been all research and I'm behind. And so I have,
as we always are.
Yeah. I've outlined my class on my phone and I went to this workshop and that's about it. But, I was already thinking about the connection with the class as I made my module. I had to cut some stuff from my module, but there's a lot of, I've already, talked a little bit about it. I've already funneled what I know about the sins, like through the Virtues Project as I understand it. So it will be incorporated in some way. And, kind of like, I'm kind of excited about it. I feel like it gives old class new energy, and also I haven't taught this class in a long time because I was directing honors, so I'm just coming back. So I have to recreate all my upper division classes anyway because I don't remember what they used to be about. And I'm also. This was my most intellectually rigorous class. It is no longer because it just, when I came here in 2008, the students read books 1 and 2 of the Nicomachean Ethics in week 1. Wow. And they did that. That's like 10 hours of reading.
Yeah, that's even impossible to me today.
And they took their quiz on Thursday on the book and it just, it was way too much to assign, but they did it. And everything was that hard, like the actual writings on the sins are the primary sources are really hard to check. And that they did that. And then the next week they read all of John Cassian's Institutes, which are monastic reflections on the sins in very kind of, thinking about every possible contingency of where a temptation could come in. And that is hard and dry and whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. Like the difference in my teaching from 2008 till now, I'm assigning a saint's life, instead of, I'll talk about Aristotle the first week as I'm framing it. And then when they start reading, the first thing they're going to read is a saint's life about one of the desert harlot saints. So I've picked the more fun, sensational readings, and I've also chopped everything down. But I'm hoping that bringing in the Virtues Project will help them find the strength to be intellectually rigorous and maybe look at other stuff. I feel like, I hope this project works. I hope it works on a national level. I feel like our students have lost, because they've been so scared and had to do No Child Left Behind and just kind of regurgitate facts and worry about being right. I feel like they've lost what we all naturally had, which was our own intellectual direction. Like it'd be rare to get a student that followed my pathway now, because I'm not from a rich family. I borrowed money to do that. That's crazy, right? But it would just be rare to get that now because they're so like, I have to get this career. It's like, you could live your whole life and die without having lived your life, So I'm hoping that this gives them the energy where they can follow their interests, even if it's not in my class. I was accepted to Wesleyan, we got this booklet on a liberal arts education. The line in it I've never forgotten. It said, if you don't stay up all night trying to figure something out during your 4 years here, then we have failed you.
Yeah, I love that. I think about that so much with my grad students. Like, I think the difference between a quote unquote successful PhD student and those who don't are they willing to really grapple with something and try to get at, it's not about quote unquote being smart. It's about this willingness to wrestle with the issues. Yeah. So
and kind of enjoy the struggle.
Yeah.
Instead of saying it's too hard. So I'm hoping I'm hoping this re-energizes our students, even if, I mean, I don't know what will happen to universities, but we need people that don't want to be told, that want to find out.
Yeah, I love that. And it actually ties in with the next question I was going to ask you, if that's okay. I'm looking at the clock, and we're a little bit already over. Is that okay for you to go?
It's okay with me, but I can be shorter in my responses.
No, this is great. Yeah. I want to be respectful of your time. I love your responses. Is it okay if we talk a little bit longer? Is that all right with you?
We can.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Because you might recall that we asked you on the survey as well, what are sort of the main things that you want your students to learn, right? And maybe you wrote quite a bit, so maybe I'll actually paste it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it might be awkward if I read it to you. Too awkward. A little bit of awkwardness is okay. And so, maybe you could take another look and sort of like talk me through how you think the virtues relate to that, if at all, and whether participating in this seminar made you think differently about what you want your students to learn.
Okay, and I see where your question and your other question are coming from, because if you read my response and the one about authenticity, it might seem a little far from curiosity, integrity, tenacity, and
humility. I always forget one of them.
Yeah, so this is the way they translate the study of history here. The other one about authenticity, I think I was thinking about what the consequences of teaching the virtues would be. So I'm not so that far afield from the virtues as just that I've kind of applied them. So in the other one, the consequences, if you practice curiosity, integrity, tenacity, and humility, then you will be a more authentic community participant. And if you practice those, you will be this kind of historian. So is kind of an intersection of my department's goals for history and the virtues project, and where they intersect. So I think the biggest challenge for students, which is funny because I got this module, is intellectual cowardice. They either want to repeat what they've heard their favorite authoritative person say, which is disastrous for their education and our country, or they want to be told what to think so they can have an A. Or they want to just do some knee-jerk opinion, like look at a source and give some knee-jerk opinion that doesn't connect to the evidence. So there's laziness there, there's fear, there's a kind of lack of responsibility there. So if I look at 1 and 2, one of the things I do as an instructor outside of teaching the virtues, which my colleagues would also do, is, for every assertion a student makes, say, what are you basing that on? And just drilling them that you don't get to make an assertion unless you can point to evidence that supports it. And they don't know how to, they're so bad at this that, it can take weeks to get them to that place, right, where they actually can't do that. The other thing then is they have a hard time being respectful to others, because they're and this is just the political environment that they're in, and also I think the pandemic I used to be better at it. And so, you know, the focus on intellectual humility kind of is a gateway to saying, you know, since you're not going to be so sure of yourself, then you have to listen to others, you know, and that's a way of building community too. And also to appreciate the diversity of cultures. And then, to teach them the skills, again, patience, which is like tenacity, right? Patience requires tenacity. It's a major medieval virtue, so I'm sure that's where it's coming from. It's the monk's tenacity. Patience, and integrity would help students ask for help when they need help. Because another thing that trips them up is when they don't know what they're doing, then they want to try and they kind of shut down. And then the joy of discovery and learning. This is where I've studied the virtues so much, and I've drunk the Kool-Aid, but I mean, I think that it's in my own life, it's been true. That if you practice the intellectual virtues, which kind of boil down to a very nice version of all of the virtues, that you end up constructing your own inner psychology and understanding of the world in a way that's a lot more resilient than if you're just pursuing success. And there was something that Duncan said. I liked all the things he said. There was something he said. There's no joy in the pursuit of grades and success. You know, and the reward, I think, for the pursuit of the virtues is a kind of resilient joy, because you make things your own. It doesn't seem like they might say, oh, you're controlling yourself, but you make things your own. And I mean, a monk would say that too, you know, that they're looking for inner tranquility in a difficult time. But the way that we've crafted the intellectual virtues, you don't have to seclude yourself. You can go out in the world, but you're not going to be batted around. You're going to be able to be a conscious member. There might be disappointments and frustrations, and, you know, you might deal with horrific things. The world is difficult, but it still gives you the skills to hold on to your own ability to navigate, right? And so it's completely consistent with all the ancient philosophies, you know, whether it's Stoicism, even like Epicureanism, you know, it doesn't have to be Aristotle's understanding of virtue, but that's very practical understanding, not necessarily metaphysical. So I would love them to, you know, understand the joy of discovery and learning, which toddlers have, right? It's something we beat out of people.
It's something what?
That we kind of beat out of people in getting to conform. And so, and I think my generation, you know, I'm Gen X, we had that in school. We didn't have to get particular grades. I was a little kid in the 70s. It was awesome, you know? It's like, but anyway.
Yeah, this is really, I love listening to you, how you're like connecting it both to your research, but then also your own sort of educational experience. And it sounds like, so you mentioned that you hadn't yet used the modules, right? But you're thinking about using them or planning to use them. But I was also wondering more generally, so sort of apart from using the modules specifically, do you feel like there are ways that you incorporate ideas related to the virtues in your teaching already? Maybe especially, I don't know if you've taught, I know it's only been like a few weeks, right? Oh, you said you're not teaching this quarter.
No.
But so it would be before the training, right? But essentially ways that, because the modules is one way, right?
Right.
Of incorporating it. But as you're thinking about your teaching practice, do you feel like there are ways that you're doing this kind of work?
I think that I will incorporate now that I know that the Anteater Virtues Project is out there, I will incorporate the 4 intellectual virtues and the definitions that I used in my, in my contribution, that I will incorporate those into every class. I feel like those make explicit something I was trying to teach them all along. And I'm hoping, and it might be too much, I'm hoping that will get us back to where we were before. Not exactly the same place, but I used to have students that had that. You know, people don't sign up for a medieval history class. Well, in the past, students didn't sign up for a medieval history class unless they wanted something rigorous. And so I used to have students, I mean, students are under too much pressure now, but I used to have students who would do all the suggested reading. The scholarly, you know, when I first, I guess it's a monsters class. My monsters class, the first iteration of it, every class meeting had a bibliography of 10 scholarly articles. And I had students that were reading all of them, coming up and saying, yeah, so-and-so, you know, this is really interesting. And then, you know, talking after class about ideas, not grades or I didn't do that homework, but just ideas. And we had that all the time for the first, like, maybe 3 or 4 years that I was here. So yeah, I will incorporate these because it kind of wakes me up to, okay, this is what I cared about. You know, this is a Wesleyan education. We were on the honor code. We could take the professor wouldn't be in the room for our in-class exams. We could leave the room and go get lunch if we wanted to. We signed everything, no aid, no violation, and our signature. And people were so invested in it that cheating and getting caught would be social death on campus, you know? And so it was wonderful. That kind of like free inquiry but a UCI student, I've never met a UCI student that would do this. I would risk an F on a paper if I disagreed with the professor and just write what I thought instead of being mad at them for, you know, be like, I'm going to try to change their mind. And, you know, our students want the A so badly. So this is a way, I think, to help them get around it. So I will put it on my syllabus and I will talk about it. Even in classes that are not this class. And I'm teaching our first year PhD research seminar. And so I will talk about this too. I think what I would add is the need for aid. Like
the need for?
Need for help. Like, you know, if you portray the virtues as something that you have to pursue by yourself, that can be very weighty. It's okay to get help. You have to be honest about the help you seek and honest when you're seeking help. But, you know, so I will incorporate it. I'll definitely incorporate it that way. And I probably will make my own module, you know, available to the students right away, in all my classes, you know, just avoiding intellectual cowardice. It lets them get to know my teaching philosophy through the lens of this program. So I'll do that. And then it just happens that the wisdom module fits with this Deadly Sins class. I don't know if I would incorporate it into other classes, but I need to acquaint myself with with the program.
Yeah. And do you feel like the students will appreciate this? Or what's your kind of, as you're thinking about doing it, what's your prediction?
So I think the students will appreciate me including the intellectual virtues on the syllabus and talking about them because they like to know where their professor is coming from, whether or not they will use that as a tool for their own education. 30% of them will be angry that that's been suggested, right? I mean, there's always, and then, you know, the middle will probably think it's interesting, but maybe not consciously try to do it. and then there'll be people that are on fire about it. And that's been my experience with any kind of big change. When you're teaching in the humanities, sometimes you're teaching for the realization that they're going to have 5 years after they graduate. So I am very comfortable putting that out there. At least they'll know how to navigate me and themselves. And some, they could be judgmental. And I also think, and I think Duncan said this, that we have to model it. And so if I'm going to model it, especially humiliating, say, okay, this is where I am coming from right now, based on, this background and this many years of teaching. But let's talk about it. What do you think about framing class this way? And, so, I mean, with that, I think that it will work, but, yeah, I expect it will work because of the nature of the class that I'm experimenting with. Yeah.
And do you feel like this kind of teaching approach is valued by the university?
I think this kind of teaching approach is not valued in our larger culture. I don't know if the university has jumped behind the Anti Virtues Project, which I think is smart. I think if universities, right, we can't teach straight civics right now because that's not the political situation that we're in. If universities don't have something about teaching virtue or something about, then what's the difference between what we're doing and going on Wikipedia and memorizing what it says, right? From an undergrad, I know Wikipedia is very flawed as a professor, but from, the general public's perspective, they think they can find out what they need to know online. And so what are we doing here? And so I think talking about that is important. I feel like the university values, I mean, that workshop had the best food I've ever seen at a workshop. I mean, universities obviously valuing Duncan's project. I think any university could see this is a way to enliven things. And also anyone in a humanities school could see this is a way to show how we're relevant. And as an instructor, this is a way to give students power back, which has been stripped of them. I mean, it's violent to spend your whole education memorizing facts to regurgitate on tests. I mean, the whole No Child Left Behind it's terrible. It's broken their minds. And I tell them that. I said, what was done to you was incredible violence. Let's try to regain our ability to think, So, yeah.
Yeah, I wanna take one of your classes. I feel like I would.
Well, we'll see. I'm on a practice.
Feeling all inspired. Do you have a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about your experience making the module? Or so, and then I'll try and wrap it up quickly, because I know I'm always like, oh, it'll take an hour. So I want to be respectful of your time. I wanted to chat just a little bit because you've actually been involved in making a module, right? And so just hear, I guess, a little bit about what that experience was like, what was challenging about it, what was fun about it, how and what did it make you think about the intellectual virtues and your own discipline, right? The kind of work that you do. So that's multiple questions folded into one, but I'm trying to speed things along a little bit.
So the most challenging was the video part. If I had been able to drop into a studio that was perfectly fit, that would be great. I ended up videoing it at my brother's kitchen table.
Okay.
It had perfect lighting. And also just, nobody likes, if somebody else is doing the video, you can't see yourself. It's just not fun. But, so that was the most challenging part. I didn't know what was expected of me, even though it was good to watch the videos. And of course, Duncan's so polished because this is his project. It was easy for me to talk about what I thought about the virtues. I feel like I got a hard assignment, but it ended up being a good assignment. Intellectual cowardice. I mean, one, to get to have to talk about a bias. Like I'm the face of intellectual cowardice. That's kind of not good. But, and then the fit between my research person and intellectual cowardice. At first I thought this is not a fit. It'll be interesting. If this gets out, what Gerson scholars would say. He's a much beloved intellectual. One of the most important late medieval intellectuals ever. Just because he synthesized the whole Middle Ages. And, you know, I feel like my interpretation works. You could push against it. So that was hard to come to that, and then hard to get it to all fit in a short amount of time. And actually I had to cut 10 minutes. The first thing I sent Josh was 30 minutes long, and it started with Aristotle, and he's like, cut this. Of course you're covering it elsewhere. But otherwise it was really fun because it forced me to think about my teaching and also practice how I would teach or intellectual virtues to my students. When I was making my module, I had no idea who else was participating. And it was very exciting. I was like, wow, this is like who's who in the School of Humanities. That's, you know, I feel privileged to be in this group now, you know, but it was a good experience. It took more time than I thought. The hardest part, time-wise, being working my own research into that frame, just because that's not a historical question. Was Gerson an intellectual coward? Is not, you know, a historical question. It's like, why did he make these decisions? That is interesting. But in the end, it was really empowering. Right. Because I ended up talking about, in some respects, the long history of the witch hunts, which is a research interest for me, and also, unfortunately, a question of contemporary interest. We kind of have a proto-witch hunting environment going on politically right now. And I think for anyone who studies the late medieval, early modern period, it's terrifying. And so looking at this guy who's a good guy, you know, a voice of reason, etc., who uses this weak argument to undermine his competition, but because of his stature, provides support for witch hunting conspiracies later. It's just, it's interesting. You know, it's chilling when we think about it. But we see our politicians make those choices every day, and not thinking about the long-term consequences of this can contribute to the persecution of a group of people eventually. So it was in the end, it was a great experience. It took more time than I had, but now I'm glad it's done. And,
And at least you're in the virtues, right? So it's a little bit easier maybe to incorporate it in your classes.
Yeah. I mean, I had to leave out, you know, my problem was to focus on the anteater part of it and not bring in too much of what else I know. But yeah, I'm happy with it, and I'm very happy with how I'll be able to use it in my teaching. Yeah.
Great. One final question, hopefully. Let me make sure I haven't forgotten anything. As you're we've talked about this a little bit, but as you're thinking back to the seminar and listening, was there anything that you remember sort of disagreeing with or struggling with, or that didn't quite make sense?
You know, I took very careful notes. I kind of wish that instead of rapid fire presentation, there had been more room for engagement. And I think I might have been the only humanist in the room. I could be wrong, but
I think there were a few natural scientists and then someone from, I think, like the medical area, I think. Yeah.
Which is cool. I kind of wish that we had had time to talk, but I also know it had to, like, everyone has limited time. So in a way it was very effective. I don't remember disagreeing. I remember leaving excited. I was like, wow, I think this could be big. I think it's necessary. I think it's worth the risk. And I'm actually surprised and very impressed that, like, the school's behind it, you know, which, I mean, Duncan must have done a good job selling this. And he does have Templeton funds, right?
Yes.
So that's like a stamp of approval. So that's wonderful. I'm no longer I was very idealistic when I was younger.
Yeah, I know the foundation is, it has a reputation, right?
Right. And,
I'm sure it helps that the project has virtues in the title.
Right. Yes.
They're thinking about virtues in a particular way.
Yeah. And I do think, it will be challenged as an elitist kind of thing because the cultivation of the virtues has always been challenged that way. But we have undercut so much from that challenge. So I think, I was also very happy that there's a wisdom component that's multicultural. Because the pursuit of the virtues as we understand them are, it's a very Mediterranean, Western European understanding of things. But every society has this is the way you do life, or multiple ways to do it. And if it even opens up that question for students and brings them back to that, here we are in late capitalism, you need to think about this. And I think maybe, so I don't have any questions. Sorry, I'm just going to go off on a tangent. It's not really, but so I liked the presentation. I felt it was quick. It raised, I wanted to discuss with people, but I also came thinking about practicalities, and any of the part I would disagree with, I was kind of thinking, how would a leftist intellectual receive this information? And, there's an answer that could say, you don't have to cultivate your own intellectual virtues. You need to be in solidarity with the rest. So that's kind of interesting. But I don't even know if people would respond that way. I'm just responding that way because I know that the ancient and medieval tradition of the virtues was an elitist thing. You couldn't be a poor person and become a monk. You couldn't be a poor person in antiquity and become a philosopher. And so, and Aristotle even said, if you're poor, you don't really, you can't really pursue happiness. It's outside your, poor or unfortunate. And so I think, I came in knowing that there was that possible disagreement. And there's part of me that finds that valid, but I agreed to embrace the project. And I think it's a good project. I'm happy to embrace it, at least for a while. Nothing's forever.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being willing to, share so much and take me on a journey.
Okay.
I feel like I learned more about medieval Europe listening to you than I knew before we got on the call. And so I just am very appreciative. Would it be all right if I contact you again at the end of the academic year to possibly do a follow-up? You don't have to say yes at the time, right? But just if you're willing to be contacted, just because it'd be nice to speak to you again after you've hopefully, had a chance. Well, after you've taught, right? And then, because I think we're trying to interview people soon after the workshop, but then again, a little bit later, right? Because teaching is crazy, and
Yes,
there's always new things that pop up, right? And
right.
so,
You never know
yeah.
how it's going to go. Yeah. Yeah, that was fine with me.
Thank you. And then what I'll also do is I'll send Duncan and Josh a note to say that it would be great if you could have some support in just someone to ask questions, right, about the modules and sort of like practicalities.
Yeah, I don't have questions yet, but I just want to know who I reach out to if I have questions.
Yeah. So I will email them, and if it's okay to mention that you're the person who asked about it, that's okay, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's
I
totally
obviously
fine.
won't share any of your...
I would share most of my responses here, publicly.
It wasn't,
maybe not about the Templeton Foundation, but the rest of it, yeah.
Just in case you still want money from them sometime,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much again. I really enjoyed talking with you and hearing how you're thinking about this, which is, it's very clear to me that you've thought a lot about the virtues and their interconnections with your work. And so I really appreciate that you were willing to share that with me.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Of course.
This helps me prepare for my class.
Excellent. I'm glad that it was useful in that way. So I'll plan to follow up at the end of the year, and I'll be sure to let Josh and Duncan know that they'll be sort of like, your points of contact. And I'll circle back to you on that as well.
Okay, great. Well, good luck with everything.
Thank you. You as well. I hope you have a good winter break.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.